Welcome back to the shadows, everyone. I'm Mr. Horror Man. You've just stepped into that quiet, unsettling corner of the internet where the lights stay on, but fear finds you anyway. Tonight, we aren't exploring the supernatural. We aren't looking for ghosts or ghouls. No, tonight, we are looking at something much worse. We are looking at the person in the car outside your house. We are looking at the student sitting in the back of your lecture hall. We are looking at the two figures standing at the foot of your bed while you dream of being safe. Tonight, I have 3 allegedly true stories sent in by subscribers who realized far too late that their privacy was a lie. These stories are long, they are visceral, and they are a reminder that the most dangerous monsters don't have claws, they have patience. So, lock your deadbolts, check the windows one more time, pull the blankets tight, and whatever you do, don't look at the gap under your bedroom door. Let's dive into the darkness. Story 1. The Syllabus of Sin. I thought I was falling for the perfect college guy. He was the golden boy of the Greek system, charming, attentive, and brilliant. But I didn't realize that while I was falling in love, I was actually a commodity being traded in the dark, and my buyer was the man responsible for my future. I've gone back and forth for over a year about whether to record this. Even now, sitting in my room with the door locked and the curtains drawn, my hands are shaking. This happened during my sophomore year at a prestigious university in the Northeast. I won't say which one, but think of ivy-covered brick buildings, biting cold winds that whip off the Atlantic, and a sense of academic pressure that feels like a physical weight on your chest. I'm an English major. I'm also a member of Kappa, one of the top sororities on campus. I mention this not to sound elitist, but to set the scene. My life was calculated. My GPA was a 3.9 because I needed to get into a top-tier law school. I didn't have time for nonsense. I was focused, driven, and perhaps a little too trusting of the systems designed to protect me. Last semester, I enrolled in an upper-level seminar on English Romanticism. It was a small class, maybe 22 students in total. We met in a basement room of the library that smelt like old paper and damp stone. The class was led by a professor, but the real teaching happened in the discussion sections run by the teaching assistant. His name was Roar, just Roar. To this day, I don't know if it was his first name, his last name, or some weird moniker he'd adopted. He was in his late 20s, lanky, with a pale, sallow complexion, and hair that always looked like he'd forgotten to wash it after a week in a basement. He gave off this, I'm in a band, but we only play experimental noise energy. He was an oddball, but in academia, oddballs are standard. The class was brutal. Romanticism is all about nature, memory, and the sublime. But most of the students were juniors and seniors who were burnt out. The silence in that room was deafening. Roar hated it. You could see the vein in his neck throb when no one would answer a question about Wordsworth. He would chirp at people, mocking them, calling on them when they were clearly zoned out, trying to embarrass them into participation. But there was one guy who always saved us, Luke. Luke was a junior, a member of one of the top Greek fraternities, and he was effortlessly charismatic. He had that messy brown hair that looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, but his eyes were sharp. He actually did the reading. He'd crack a joke right when Roar was about to snap, breaking the tension and making the class feel human again. I remember thinking he was the perfect balance of smart and goofy. Because I cared about my GPA, I was the only other person who talked. So for 3 hours a week, it was the me, Luke, and Roar show. We debate the nuances of Tintern Abbey while everyone else scrolled through their phones. Roar seemed to appreciate me. He'd nod along when I spoke, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that I mistook for academic respect. For my first major essay, I wrote about the concept of the sublime as a form of psychological trauma. I was proud of it. When Roar handed it back, the margins were covered in his cramped, frantic handwriting. It wasn't just feedback, it was agreement. He wrote things like, "You see what others cannot," and "Your mind is a rare landscape." That's when the vibe started to shift. Roar began paying a disturbing amount of attention to me. In class, he would stare at me even when Luke was talking. He'd ask follow-up questions that were borderline personal. Do you feel the same isolation as the narrator? Do you think beauty is worth the price of pain? I brushed it off. I told my sorority sisters that my TA was a weirdo with a crush. We laughed about it over drinks. Then, Luke and I started seeing each other outside of class. Our Greek houses had a lot of overlap. We saw each other at a joint mixer, then a date night, and eventually we just started gravitating toward each other at every party. Luke was sweet. He was attentive. He'd text me to make sure I got home safe. He'd bring me coffee during finals week. By the second month, we were officially dating. It was uncomplicated. It was the one part of my life that didn't feel like a chore. One afternoon, I was walking to my car behind the lecture hall. It was one of those gray, drizzly northeast days where the sun seems to give up at 3 p.m. I saw two figures standing near the loading dock, partially obscured by a dumpster. It was Luke and Roar. They were smoking. I didn't even know Luke smoked, and they were huddled together talking in low, urgent tones. They looked like old friends. Luke was laughing at something Roar said, and Roar was leaning in close, tapping Luke's shoulder. When I asked Luke about it later that night, he didn't even blink. He laughed and said, "Babe, I'm just trying to secure that A. Roar is a lonely guy. If I let him vent about his dissertation and share a cigarette, he's not going to grade my final paper too harshly. It's called networking." It felt a little slimy, but it made sense. Luke was a bro. Networking was his language. The horror didn't start until 3 weeks before finals. Luke was sleeping at my apartment. He'd fallen asleep on top of the covers, his screen glowing. A YouTube video of some obscure lecture was playing on silent. I went to move the phone to the nightstand, but as I picked it up, a notification popped up. It was a Venmo alert. Payment received $400. The note was just a single emoji, a camera. I'm a college girl. I have trust issues by default. I used Luke's thumb to unlock the phone while he was dead to the world. I told myself I was looking for another girl. I was prepared for a cheating scandal. I was not prepared for what I found. Luke's photo gallery was a graveyard of my privacy. There were hundreds of photos of me. Some were normal, me at dinner, me laughing at a party. But then I scrolled back. There were photos of me through the window of the library, photos of me walking to my car in the rain, photos of me in my sorority house taken from the street. And then the bedroom photos, photos of me sleeping, photos of me getting dressed taken through a crack in the door, photos I never knew existed. I felt like the floor had vanished beneath my feet. I was hyperventilating, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. I went into his messages. I found a thread with an unsaved number. Every single one of those photos had been sent to that number. The messages attached were cold, transactional. Luke, she's at the gym now, wearing the black leggings. Unsaved number. Get closer. I want to see the expression on her face when she's tired. Luke, that'll cost an extra $50. Unsaved number. Sent. Don't let her see you. I scrolled up. The messages went back to the second week of the semester. Luke hadn't met me at a party by accident. He had been hired. Roar, the TA who found my mind fascinating, had been paying Luke to date me, to document my life, and to provide him with a personal look at the student he was obsessed with. I was a project. I was a syllabus. I woke Luke up by throwing his phone at his face. I was screaming, incoherent, jagged sounds of pure betrayal. He tried to lie. He tried to say it was for a project, that Roar was studying social dynamics. When he realized I'd seen the Venmo payments, he just went quiet. He didn't even apologize. He just looked at me with this hollow, terrifying indifference and said, "It was easy money, Chloe. You're a pretty girl. People pay for that." I kicked him out. I called the police. I called the dean. The investigation was swift. Luke was expelled within the week. Roar was fired, and when the police searched his apartment, they found more than just photos. They found a shrine. It sounds like a cliché from a movie, but it was real. He had my essays pinned to the wall, with certain words circled in red. He had a map of my daily route. He had a pair of my gym shorts that I thought I'd lost in the laundry 3 weeks ago. Roar faced stalking and voyeurism charges. The foot of the bed. The hook. Standard burglars want your electronics. They want your mother's jewelry. But the two people who broke into my house in the middle of a snowstorm didn't touch the TV or the silver. They only wanted one thing from the kitchen, and then they came for me. My name is Mikey. I'm 22 and I live in a part of Northern California that most people forget exists. We don't have palm trees here. We have redwoods so thick they swallow the sunlight by 4 p.m. We have snow that piles up until you have to climb out of your second-story window just to shovel the porch. It's isolated, beautiful, and if you're alone, absolutely terrifying. 2 weeks ago, my parents flew to Portugal for a wedding. I was ecstatic. Living with your parents at 22 was a drag, so a week of total silence and no one complaining about my gaming hours felt like a vacation. Our house is a standard 3-bedroom ranch, but because of the terrain, it's built on a slope. My bedroom is at the far end of a long, narrow hallway. The guest room is in the middle, and my parents' room is at the other end. The first night was fine. I stayed up late, ate a frozen pizza, and went to bed around 2 a.m. The second night is when the world broke. I went to bed earlier that night, around midnight. I was exhausted for some reason, a heavy, bone-deep fatigue that made my limbs feel like lead. I remember performing my ritual. I'm a bit OCD about my room. I have a sliding mirror closet door, and ever since I was a kid, I've been terrified of it being open at night. I always make sure it slid completely shut and clicked into the track. I checked it twice that night. I fell asleep instantly. At 3:14 a.m., I woke up. I didn't wake up slowly. I didn't drift out of a dream. My eyes snapped open and I was instantly 100% alert. The house was dead silent. No wind, no heater humming, just the sound of my own breath. But something was wrong. The air in the room felt occupied. It felt like there was a displacement of space, a heaviness that shouldn't be there. I lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness. I looked to my left, toward the closet. The door was wide open. Not just a crack, it was pushed all the way to the side. The mirrors reflected the dull gray light of the snow outside, creating a jagged, distorted image of my room. My heart began to thrum against my ribs. I closed that door, I thought. I checked it twice. Then I looked toward the foot of my bed. There were 2 figures. They weren't tall, maybe 5'8" or 5'9". They were wearing dark, heavy parkas with the hoods pulled so far forward that their faces were just black voids. They weren't moving. They were just standing there. One on the left corner, one on the right. They were perfectly symmetrical, like 2 gargoyles carved from the shadows. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt like it had been filled with concrete. I reached out a trembling hand toward my nightstand, my fingers searching for my phone. I didn't want to call for help. I wanted the light. I needed to see that they weren't real. I grabbed the phone and clicked the side button. The flashlight beam cut through the dark like a blade. I screamed. The light hit them, and for a split second, I saw their eyes, pale, wide, and completely devoid of emotion. They didn't blink. They didn't flinch. Then they moved. It wasn't a human movement. It was a frantic scurrying motion, like 2 massive insects being exposed to the sun. One dived toward the open closet, and the other bolted for my bedroom door. I heard a sharp metallic clatter as something hit the hardwood floor near my feet. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. I didn't hide under the covers. I didn't freeze. I jumped out of bed, fueled by a primal lizard brain rage. I chased the figure that ran into the hallway. "Who are you?" I was roaring, my voice cracking. "Get out of my house!" I heard their boots pounding on the floor. Thud, 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 moving toward the living room. I rounded the corner just in time to hear the front door slam. I ran to the window, but the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see 5 feet past the porch. I stood there in the living room, gasping for air, clutching my phone like a weapon. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I went back to my room to call 911. I kept the flashlight on, sweeping it across the floor. I stopped when the beam hit the objects that had fallen during the struggle. It was an 8-inch carving knife from our kitchen. The blade was polished stainless steel. It was the knife my dad used for Thanksgiving turkey. It was heavy, sharp enough to shave with, and it had been sitting in the wooden block in the kitchen when I went to bed. That's when the true horror set in. They hadn't broken in with a weapon. They had come inside, gone into the kitchen, and chosen a knife. Then they had walked down the long hallway, opened my closet, and stood at the foot of my bed. They had been standing there for God knows how long, just waiting. The police arrived 30 minutes later. They were dismissive, as small-town cops often are. They found no signs of forced entry. They told me I must have had a night terror and slept-walked into the kitchen. "You're a young guy, Mikey. Stress does weird things to the brain," the sergeant told me while sipping coffee in my kitchen. "You probably took the knife, went to your room, and imagined the rest. Lock your doors next time." My parents came home early and gave me the same speech. They were embarrassed that I'd wasted police resources. They treated me like a child who was afraid of the dark. But they didn't see what I saw. 2 weeks have been passed. I don't sleep in that room anymore. I moved my bed into the living room, right next to the front door. And every night at around 3 a.m., I hear a sound coming from the back of the house. It's faint. It's rhythmic. It's the sound of a sliding mirror door being pushed open and shut. Scrape, scrape, click. I think they're still in the house. I think they never left. I think they're just waiting for me to go back into the hallway. Story 3. The Blue Sedan. The Hook. I moved across the city to escape my stalker. I changed my routine, my hair color, and my social media. But this morning, I found a note under my door that proved he didn't just find me. He's been watching me sleep for a month. My name is Natasha. This story started 3 months ago in Columbus, Ohio. I'm 23 and I had just moved into my first solo apartment. It was a small 1-bedroom unit in a mid-sized complex. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No roommates, no drama, just me and my cat, Luna. I work remote as a freelance illustrator, which means I spend a lot of time at home. My desk faces the window, which overlooks the back parking lot and a thin line of trees. It was a quiet existence, and I loved it. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing a guy. The first time was on the stairs. He was wearing a gray hoodie and carrying a bag of groceries. He was in his 30s, totally undiscreet. He did that awkward dance where you both move to the same side of the staircase. He didn't say sorry. He didn't even look up. He just shouldered past me, his arm hitting mine hard enough to bruise. I thought he was just a jerk. I moved on. A few days later, I was taking the trash out to the dumpsters. It was around 6 p.m., getting dark. I saw him again. He was just standing by the edge of the woods, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't walking a dog. He was just looking at our building. Specifically, he was looking at the second floor. My floor. I felt a slight prickle of unease, but I dismissed it. He's a neighbor, I told myself. Maybe he's just taking a smoke break. Then the car appeared. It was a navy blue sedan, an older model, maybe an Accord or a Camry. It started appearing in the parking lot every afternoon. It would park in the furthest guest spot, facing my window. The windows were tinted dark, but through the windshield, I could see the silhouette of a man sitting in the driver's seat. He would sit there for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time. He never got out. He never went into an apartment. He just sat. I'm an artist, so I'm observant by nature. I started keeping a log. Monday, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. Thursday, 1 p.m. until I went to bed. I started closing my blinds, but I could still feel him. You know that feeling when someone is staring at the back of your neck? It became a permanent sensation. I stopped working by the window. I moved my desk to the corner of the room, tucked away in the dark. Then came the night at Chipotle. I decided I needed to get out of the house. I was starting to feel like a prisoner. I drove to a Chipotle about 20 minutes away in a completely different part of town. I wanted to be in a bright, crowded place. I wanted to feel normal. I was sitting at a small table near the window, eating my bowl and scrolling through my phone. I felt that prickle again, that cold, heavy weight on my neck. I looked up. Sitting at a table directly across from me was the man in the gray hoodie. He didn't have any food. He didn't have a drink. He was just sitting there, his hands folded on the table, staring at me. His expression was blank. No anger, no lust, just a terrifying, hollow focus. I felt a wave of nausea. My stomach actually cramped with fear. I didn't finish my food. I grabbed my bag and walked out. I didn't run. I didn't want him to know how scared I was, but I moved fast. I got into my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a second, my heart racing. I looked back at the restaurant. He was standing by the glass door, watching me. I drove home. I didn't take the highway. I took a series of back roads. I made 3 U-turns. I drove through a residential neighborhood and sat in a church parking lot for 20 minutes to see if anyone followed me. No one did. When I got back to my apartment, the navy blue sedan was gone. I felt a surge of relief. Maybe it was a coincidence, I told myself. Maybe he just likes Chipotle. The next morning, I woke up and walked into my kitchen to make coffee. I looked out the window. The sedan was there. I'd had enough. I called the police. An officer came out about an hour later. He was polite, but I could tell he thought I was being emotional. "Look, ma'am," he said, leaning against his cruiser. "The car is registered to a resident of this complex. He isn't breaking any laws by sitting in his car, and seeing someone at a restaurant isn't a crime. Unless he threatens you or follows you into your home, there's not much we can do. My advice? Get some better curtains." I felt like I was screaming underwater. No one was listening. That night, I did exactly what the officer said. I bought heavy blackout curtains. I pinned them to the wall so there were no gaps. I lived in total darkness for a week. One morning, I was leaving for the grocery store. I opened my front door and stepped into the hallway. There was a piece of yellow legal paper taped to my door. In neat block letters, it said, "I liked the old curtains better. I can't see the way you brush your hair before bed anymore. Please open them tonight so I can see if you're still okay." I didn't even go back inside. I ran to my car, drove to my parents' house, and didn't look back. I called a moving company the next day. I paid the $2,000 penalty to break my lease. I didn't care. I just wanted to be gone. I moved into my parents' guest room. I changed my phone number. I deleted my Instagram. I felt safe. I felt hidden. That was a month ago. This morning, my dad went out to get the newspaper. He came back inside looking confused. "Hey, Nat," he said, "there's a car parked at the end of the cul-de-sac, an old blue sedan. Do you know anyone who drives one of those?" My heart stopped. I walked to the front window and peeked through the blinds. There it was, 2 blocks away, the navy blue sedan. He didn't find me by accident. He didn't follow me. He waited for me. And now I'm realizing that you can change your address, but you can't change the fact that someone has decided you belong to them. Channel outro. Sound design. The fire from the intro begins to die down. The low pulsing heartbeat returns, slightly faster this time. Mr. Horrorman. 3 stories, 3 survivors. But the question is, for how long? The scariest thing about these tales isn't the monsters or the jump scares. It's the realization that privacy is an illusion. We think our walls protect us. We think our locks are enough. But as Chloe, Mikey, and Natasha found out, a lock is just a minor inconvenience for someone who is willing to wait. If you have a story that makes you question the shadows in your own home, send it to the email in the description. I'll make sure your voice is heard. If these stories made your skin crawl, let me know you're still out there. Leave a like. It helps keep this channel alive in the dark. Subscribe to Mr. Horrorman so you don't miss the next true nightmare, and turn on the bell icon, because the next story doesn't announce itself, it just shows up, and you'll want to know when it does. Before you go tonight, do me a favor. Walk to your front door, check the deadbolt, look at your sliding closet doors, and if you see a navy blue sedan on your street tonight, maybe it's time to move again. I'm Mr. Horrorman. Sleep tight, everyone, if you can.